I didn't shout back when my daughter, Tiffany, yelled, "You either do what my husband says or get out of my house." Her words stung, but I stayed calm. Instead of arguing, I gave a small smile, grabbed my old suitcase, and walked out of the home I'd built with my sweat and savings. She thought I'd break down, like I always did. But this time, I was different. A week later, my phone showed 28 missed calls from her. They had no idea what I had planned. They'd regret how they treated me soon enough. Before I go on, please subscribe to the channel and share where you're reading this in the comments below. The keys were still warm in my hand as I pushed open the front door, grocery bags digging into my wrists. It was a warm Saturday afternoon, and sunlight poured through the living room curtains, giving everything a soft, golden glow. Normally, that light made me feel at peace. Not today. Harry, my son-in-law, was sprawled out in my favorite leather recliner, the one my late wife, Martha, gave me before cancer stole her away. His dirty socks were propped up on the footrest, and a half-empty beer bottle dangled from his hand. The TV remote sat on his stomach like he owned everything in the room. He didn't even glance at me as he barked, "Grab me another beer from the fridge since you're up." I set the grocery bags down slowly on the floor. The weight of the milk, bread, and vegetables had left red marks on my hands. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You heard me," Harry muttered, eyes glued to the basketball game on TV. "A Corona. None of that cheap stuff you buy." A cold feeling settled in my chest. I'd bought those Coronas just for him, using my Social Security check to get the brand he liked. I never drank beer myself. "Harry, I just got home," I said. "I need to put these groceries away first." He finally looked at me, his face twisting into that annoyed look he always gave when I didn't jump at his orders. "What's the problem? You're already standing. Just grab it." "The problem," I said, my voice firm, "is that this is my house." Harry's feet hit the floor with a loud thud. He stood up, towering over me. At 30, he was taller and broader than I was at 62. He thought his size could scare me, but I dealt with tougher men long before he was born. "Your house?" he said, smirking. "That's funny. Tiffany and I live here. We pay the bills with my money. You're just here." The kitchen door creaked open, and Tiffany stepped into the room, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her blonde hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, and her eyes darted between me and Harry. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice sharp, like when she was a teenager and I'd caught her sneaking out. "Your dad's making a big deal out of nothing," Harry said, not looking away from me. "I asked him to grab me a beer, and he's acting like it's a crime." Tiffany turned to me, her face full of disappointment, like I was the one causing trouble. "Dad, just get him the beer. It's not worth a fight." But Harry wasn't done. He stepped closer, so close I could smell the beer on his breath. "Here's how it works, Clark," he said, his voice low and mean. "You live in our house now. You want to stay? You do what I say. No arguing. No attitude. Our house." I repeated, keeping my voice calm even though my heart was pounding. "That's right," Tiffany said, stepping next to Harry. They stood side by side, like a wall against me. "Dad, you need to choose. Either you help out and do what Harry asks, or you pack your bags and leave." Her words hit me like a punch. I looked at my daughter, searching for any sign of the little girl who used to hold my hand during scary movies. But all I saw was Harry's smug look mirrored on her face. I took a deep breath. "All right," I said quietly. Harry grinned, thinking he'd won. "Good. Now, about that beer, I'll pack," I said. His grin vanished. Tiffany's mouth dropped open, like she'd expected me to back down, to apologize, to shuffle to the fridge like a broken man. But I turned and walked down the hallway, my boots steady on the hardwood floor Martha and I had sanded and polished together 25 years ago. Behind me, I heard Harry's sharp breath and Tiffany's soft, "Dad, wait." But I didn't stop that I in my bedroom. I pulled my old suitcase from the closet shelf. It was the same one Martha and I had used for our honeymoon in Yellowstone, back when we were young and dreamed of a long, happy life. Now it sat open on the bed, ready to hold what little I had left. I packed slowly but surely. Underwear, socks, 3 shirts, 2 pairs of pants, and the photo of Martha from our wedding day. I ran my thumb over her smiling face before tucking it carefully into the suitcase. As I zipped it shut, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Tiffany stood in the doorway, her arms crossed. "Dad, You don't have to do this, she said, but her voice lacked warmth. Just say sorry and we can. Forget this happened. I looked at her, my only child, and felt a deep ache in my chest. Tiffany, I said softly, this is my house. I paid for it. I raised you here. And now you're telling me to serve your husband or leave. Her face hardened. Harry's right. We're the ones keeping this place going. You're retired. You don't contribute. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I was done fighting. I picked up my suitcase and walked past her, through the living room where Harry was back in my recliner, pretending to watch TV. He didn't say a word, but I felt his eyes on me as I opened the front door. The spring air was warm outside, and the neighborhood was quiet. I set my suitcase in the back of my old pickup truck and climbed into the driver's seat. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Tiffany stood in the doorway, watching me go. I didn't wave. That night, I checked into a cheap motel a few miles away. The room smelled like old carpet, but it was mine for now. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my phone. No calls yet, but I knew they'd come. Harry and Tiffany thought they'd won, but they didn't know the whole story. This house, the one they called theirs, was still in my name. The mortgage was paid off years ago, and I'd never signed it over to them. They'd been living there rent-free, and I'd been covering the property taxes and utilities. Out of my savings. The next day, I called my lawyer, an old friend who'd helped me with Martha's will. I want to sell the house, I told him, and I want it done fast. He didn't ask too many questions, just got to work. By the end of the week, the house was listed, and my phone started buzzing. First, it was Tiffany, leaving voicemails. Dad, where are you? Why aren't you answering? Then Harry, his voice sharp. Clark, what's this about a for sale sign? Call me back. I didn't call back. I wasn't ready yet. Let them sweat a little longer. They thought they could push me out of my own home, but they'd learn soon enough that I wasn't as weak as they thought. My plan was just beginning. The living room was filled with the soft hum of urgent whispers. Harry's voice occasionally broke through, louder than Tiffany's quieter, hesitant tones. They were trying to figure out what to do, how to handle my sudden decision to leave. I stood in my bedroom, hands moving on their own, folding shirts neatly, rolling ties with care, packing my life into a single suitcase. I wrapped Martha's photo in tissue paper and tucked it into the side pocket, next to my medications, reading glasses, and the small leather journal where I kept track of every penny spent. Each item felt heavy with meaning, a piece of the life I was leaving behind. When I wheeled the suitcase down the hallway, the whispers stopped. The air felt thick, tense. Harry was back in his armchair, but he wasn't slouched anymore. He sat upright, his eyes sharp, watching me like I was a stranger. Tiffany stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed tightly over her chest, trying to look stern. But her eyes gave her away, nervous, unsure, maybe even a little scared. Neither of them said a word. No goodbye, no questions, just silence. I didn't expect anything else. Outside, my old Buick started on the first try, reliable as ever. I backed out of the driveway, keeping my eyes on the road, refusing to glance at the house or check if they were watching from the window. The 30-minute drive to Pine Lodge Motel gave me time to think, to let the memories flood in. Driving through downtown Kalispell, I passed the bank where I'd worked for 30 years. I thought of Tiffany's college tuition, $40,000 a year. For that fancy private school she'd begged to attend. I'd worked overtime, taken on extra clients, stayed late reviewing loan applications until my hands ached from signing forms. 4 years of that, all for her degree. Then there was her wedding, $25,000, start to finish. Harry's family couldn't cover their share, so I paid for it all. The reception hall, the flowers, the caterer, her dress. I wanted everything to be perfect for my little girl's big day, just like Martha would have wanted. I never told anyone I'd covered the whole bill. It didn't seem right to make a fuss. And then came the house. $80,000 from my retirement savings for their down payment. Because young couples need a leg up, I told myself. That's what fathers do. That's what love looks like. Month after month, the payments kept coming. $1,200 for their mortgage. $300 for utilities when their budget got tight. $500 for groceries when Harry's hours were cut at the warehouse. My Social Security check vanished into their lives, bit by bit. I told myself it was for family, for love, for Martha's memory. But as I drove, the truth settled in. I'd given too much, and they'd taken it all without a second thought. Pine Lodge Motel sat on the edge of town, its faded paint and flickering neon sign a far cry from welcoming. The room was small but clean, a single bed with a thin mattress, a wooden chair, a scratched table by the window. I set my suitcase on the luggage rack and sank onto the bed, the springs creaking under my weight. The silence here was different. Not the warm, familiar quiet of home, but a hollow, lonely stillness that echoed in my chest. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Bank numbers, insurance agents, credit card companies, numbers I knew by heart after decades in finance. Tomorrow was Sunday, but some things didn't wait for Monday. Some calls needed to be made. I opened my laptop on the wobbly table and logged into my online banking. The screen lit up with account balances, checking, savings, retirement. Numbers that told the story of a lifetime of careful planning, of skipping vacations and new cars so I could provide for my family. The cursor blinked in the search bar, steady and patient, waiting for me to decide what to do next. Sunday morning dawned gray and dreary, the sky heavy with clouds that matched my mood. I spread my paperwork across the motel table like a general, preparing for battle. Bank statements, insurance policies, legal documents, everything organized, everything in its place. The first call went to First National Bank. Sunday banking was limited, but automated systems were always awake. "Good morning, Mr. Miller," the representative said after I navigated the phone tree. Her voice was polite, professional. "How can I assist you today?" "I need to cancel the automatic mortgage payment for 847 Pine Street," I said, reading off the account number ending in 4729. "Effective immediately." A pause. The sound of keys clicking. "Sir, I see this payment has been active for 5 years. Are you certain you want to discontinue it?" "Absolutely certain," I said, my voice steady. "May I ask the reason for the change?" She asked, her tone careful. "The homeowners no longer qualify for my financial assistance," I said simply. No need to explain further. More clicking. "Very well, Mr. Miller. The payment has been canceled. You'll receive written confirmation within 3 business days." The second call was easier. Geico had been insuring Harry's Silverado and Tiffany's Honda on my policy for 3 years. $280 a month for cars I never drove, for accidents I'd never cause. "I need to remove 2 vehicles from my policy," I told the agent, giving him the details. He didn't ask why, just processed the request. The weight on my shoulders lightened just a little. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the papers spread before me. There were more calls to make, more steps to take. The utilities, the grocery deliveries, the small loans I'd never called loans out loud. Each one had been a piece of my life, given freely, taken for granted. But now, sitting in this quiet motel room, I felt something new stirring inside me. Not anger, not regret, but resolve. For the first time in years, I was choosing myself. I sat in the dim light of my motel room at Pine Lodge, the cheap wooden chair creaking under my weight. My notebook lay open on the table, filled with confirmation numbers, reference codes, and effective dates, a paper trail of my newfound financial independence. For years, I'd been footing the bill for my daughter Tiffany and her husband Harry, but that ended today. The weight of their expectations had been heavier than I realized, and with every phone call I made that morning, I felt it lifting. It started with a fight, a stupid one, really. Harry had yelled at me in my own living room over a spilled beer, his face red with anger, while Tiffany stood by, silent. "Do what I say, or get out," she'd said, her voice cold. Those words echoed in my mind as I packed a single suitcase and checked into Pine Lodge. I wasn't just leaving their house. I was leaving behind a life where I was nothing more than a bank account to them. 30 years of banking experience had taught me how to navigate the system. I knew the legal terms, the proper steps, and my rights. So, I got to work. By noon, I'd made 10 calls. First, I contacted the insurance company to cancel the life insurance policy that named Tiffany as the beneficiary. That $100,000 was meant to secure my family's future, but family meant something different now. Next, I called the bank to stop the automatic mortgage payments on the house they lived in, my house, with my name on the deed. Then, I reached out to the credit card companies, Visa, MasterCard, and Costco, to remove Tiffany as an authorized user. She'd racked up $600 a month in charges I didn't make. Balances I didn't know. Each call was polite, professional, and final. The representatives gave me confirmation numbers, and I wrote them down carefully, building my case, step by step. My phone sat silent on the motel table. No missed calls, no texts. They didn't know yet. They wouldn't until the first payment bounced or the first bill arrived with their names on it. I imagined their confusion, then their panic, when they realized the safety net was gone. I closed my laptop and walked to the window. Across the parking lot, an elderly couple loaded suitcases into a pickup truck. The woman pointed and smiled, guiding her husband with quiet teamwork. They looked happy, like they'd spent a lifetime trusting each other. Martha and I used to be like that, before she passed. Before Tiffany and Harry decided I was just a means to an end, the weeks slipped by quietly for me. I settled into a routine at Pine Lodge. Coffee from the lobby, eggs and toast at the diner down the street, and long walks through Kalispell's peaceful neighborhoods. The town was small, with tidy lawns and kids riding bikes in the evening light. It felt like a place where you could start over. My phone, though, told a different story. By Wednesday, I had 15 missed calls. By Friday, 25. I listened to the voicemails in order, curious about how their tone would change. The first messages were almost casual. Tiffany's voice was light, confused. "Dad, is something wrong with the bank?" The mortgage payment didn't go through. Harry's were short, annoyed. "Clark, the car insurance lapsed. What's going on?" But by midweek, the panic set in. Tiffany's voice cracked. "Dad, the bank says you stopped the payments. They're talking about foreclosure. Please call me back." Harry's messages turned sharp, then desperate. "Clark, you're screwing us over. Fix this now." Later, he tried a softer approach. "Okay," I was harsh. "Let's talk and sort this out." Tiffany's final message was a sob. "Dad, we can't lose the house. We'll do anything. Just talk to us." I deleted each one after listening, feeling only a faint curiosity about their growing fear. Thursday morning, a knock woke me. Through the peephole, I saw Tiffany and Harry standing outside my motel room. Tiffany's sweater was wrinkled, her eyes puffy from crying. Harry, still in his work clothes, looked like he hadn't slept. I opened the door but stood in the doorway, blocking their way in. "Dad," Tiffany started, her voice shaky. "We need to talk." "About what?" Harry cut in, his face red. "About you trying to ruin our lives over a stupid fight?" "I'm not ruining anything," I said calmly. "I'm just done paying for your lives." "The mortgage, Clark," Harry snapped. "You can't just stop paying it. That's our house." "It's my house," I corrected. "My name on the deed, my signature on the loan. You two were guests." Tiffany grabbed Harry's arm as he stepped closer. "Dad, please," she said. "We can fix this. Harry shouldn't have yelled at you. I shouldn't have said what I did. But you can't just cut us off like this, with no warning." "You gave me a choice," I reminded her. "Do what Harry says, or get out." "Those were your words." "I chose to get out." "I didn't mean it like that," she said, tears spilling over. "Yes, you did," I said, looking at her. For a moment, I saw the little girl who used to run to me with a handful of dandelions, giggling as we raked leaves together. But that girl was gone, replaced by someone who stood by while her husband humiliated me in my own home. "You meant every word. You just didn't think I'd walk away." Harry tried to sound calm, but his voice shook. "Look, Clark, we all said things we regret. But this is our home, our credit, our whole lives. You can't pull the rug out. Like this." "I already did," I said. "You wanted to handle your own lives. Now you can." I started to close the door. "Dad, wait." Tiffany's voice broke. "What about family? What about everything we've been through?" I paused, looking at her tear-streaked face. "Family goes both ways," I said quietly. "For 5 years, I paid for everything. Your house, your cars, your credit cards. When it was time for you to show me respect, you chose him instead." Harry's fake calm shattered. "You stubborn old man. You can't just— I can call the police if you keep shouting." I cut him off. "This is private property, and you're causing a scene." They stared at me, stunned, as if seeing me for the first time. Not the pushover father, not the endless ATM, but a man who'd learned to say no. Harry grabbed Tiffany's arm. "Come on, we'll figure this out ourselves." They walked back to their car, Harry's shoulders slumped, Tiffany wiping her eyes that I closed the door and sat back in the creaky chair. The notebook was still open, my neat handwriting listing every step I'd taken. It wasn't about revenge, it was about reclaiming my life. I'd spent years supporting them, thinking it was my duty as a father. But duty doesn't mean being used. I thought of Martha, how we'd built a life together on trust and respect. She'd have been proud of me today. Outside, the elderly couple's truck pulled out of the parking lot, their tail lights fading into the morning mist. I envied their quiet partnership, but for the first time in years, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe I could find that again, not with Tiffany and Harry, but with myself. I picked up my phone, ignored the new missed call, and started planning my next steps. A small apartment in Kalispell, maybe. A new routine, one that was mine alone. The future felt uncertain, but it was mine to shape. Tiffany glanced back over her shoulder, her eyes wide, like she was staring at a stranger. I watched their car disappear down the road, dust trailing behind, before I shut the motel room door and sat down at my laptop. The work of untangling. A broken relationship was far from over. There were still phone calls to make, bank accounts to close, and bills to sort out. My head was spinning, and I needed coffee, strong, black, and hot, to clear my thoughts. The diner on Main Street had always been my safe haven when Martha was still with me. After her doctor visits, we'd sit in a booth, share a slice of warm apple pie, and talk about small things, weather, neighbors, or the price of gas. Those moments felt like a lifetime. It was Tuesday morning, and I walked the familiar 3 blocks to the diner, my breath puffing out in the chilly mountain air. The routine grounded me after yesterday's heated argument with Harry, my son-in-law. That morning, I'd gone through my paperwork again, organizing bank statements, confirmation numbers, and old bills like a soldier preparing for battle. The diner's bell jingled as I stepped inside, and the smell of coffee, bacon, and syrup wrapped around me like a warm blanket. I slid into my usual corner booth, craving the comfort of routine, when a voice broke through the hum of the diner. "Clark Miller? Well, I'll be darned." Bob Harrison stood up from a table by the window, a newspaper tucked under his arm. Bob and I had worked together at First National Bank for 15 years before he transferred to the main branch in Kalispell. He handled business loans while I managed personal accounts, but we'd shared enough coffee breaks and laughs to call each other friends. "Bob." I stood, shaking his hand, a smile creeping onto my face. "Good to see you. Been a while. Mind if I sit?" Bob asked, already sliding into the booth across from me. "Haven't seen you since Martha's funeral. Heard you moved out to Pine Lodge. Everything okay?" The waitress, a young woman with a quick smile, set a steaming mug of coffee in front of me before I could answer. I stirred in some sugar, buying time to decide how much to tell Bob. He was a good guy, but as a banker, he had rules to follow, and I wasn't sure how much I wanted to spill about my family mess. "Just a family situation," I said finally, keeping it vague. "Needed some space to sort things out." Bob nodded, his eyes searching my face like he could read the worry lines there. "Your son-in-law, Harry, he tried to pull something shady at the bank a few months back." I froze, my coffee mug halfway to my mouth. "Shady? What do you mean?" Bob leaned in, lowering his voice. "He came in asking for a home equity loan on your house. 50 grand. Claimed the property was his. Even brought in paperwork to back it up." The diner's chatter, clinking plates, low conversations, faded into the background. "My house," I said, my voice tight. "He said he owned my house?" "Yup," Bob said, his face grim. "The documents looked legit at first, but when we checked the title, it was clear as day. The house is yours, Clark. No co-owners, no liens, nothing that gave him any right to it." I set my mug down slowly, my mind racing. "When was this?" "December. Maybe early January," Bob said. "I handled it myself because of the loan amount. Clark, this wasn't a mistake. The paperwork he brought? Forged. He was trying to pull a fast one." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. 3 months ago, Harry had been scheming to steal from me. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment act born out of our recent family drama. This was planned, deliberate deception. "Did you report it?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "We rejected the loan and flagged his name in our system," Bob said. "Since no money was taken, it's a legal gray area, but I kept copies of everything just in case." He paused, studying me. "You had no idea, did you?" I shook my head, my thoughts spiraling. All those months, I'd been making mortgage payments, sitting through tense family dinners where Harry complained about his money troubles. Meanwhile, he'd been plotting to rob me blind. What was he going to use the money for? I asked Bob, glanced around the diner, making sure no one was listening. He said it was for home improvements, but word around town is Harry's got gambling debts. Big ones. How big? I pressed, my stomach tightening. Big enough that people are talking, Bob said. You remember Jim Morrison, the detective? He mentioned Harry's a regular at Glacier Peaks Casino. Might be worth talking to him. I knew Jim. We'd served on the church building committee together years ago, and his daughter, Emily, had graduated with Tiffany. If Jim said Harry was caught up in gambling, it was probably true. Thanks, Bob, I said, pulling out my wallet. To pay for the coffee I'd barely touched. I appreciate you telling me. Be careful, Clark, Bob said, his voice low. A guy who'd forged documents to steal from his own family? He's desperate. Desperate people do dangerous things. I left the diner and walked back to Pine Lodge, my mind a whirlwind. Harry's demands for money, his disrespectful attitude, it all made sense now. He didn't just see me as a stubborn old man. He saw me as a piggy bank for his gambling addiction. Yesterday's ultimatum wasn't about control. It was about keeping me close so he could keep milking me for cash. Back in my motel room, I opened my laptop and created a new document titled Harry Thompson Evidence. Bob's story was just the starting point. If Harry was lying about this, what else was he hiding? I glanced at the clock, 4 p.m. The courthouse closed at 5 o'clock. I had 1 hour to file the paperwork that would turn everything upside down. After a quick lunch of a turkey sandwich and more coffee, I drove to the Flathead County Courthouse. The old brick building loomed over the street, its wide steps and tall columns intimidating to some. But to me, it felt like a fortress of justice. I climbed to the second floor, where the clerk's office smelled faintly of paper and ink. A woman in her 50s, with glasses perched on her nose, greeted me at the counter. Afternoon, I said, sliding my eviction notice and property deed across the counter. I need to file this. She scanned the documents, her eyes flicking between the deed and the eviction notice. Mr. Miller, this property is your daughter's residence, correct? It's my property, I said firmly. The residents have violated the terms of their stay. She raised an eyebrow. What terms? I was ready for this. A verbal agreement. They were supposed to show mutual respect and contribute to household expenses. They've done neither. She nodded, stamping the papers with a loud thump. 30-day notice starts today. If they fight it, we'll set a hearing. If not, the sheriff will serve final papers after the deadline. How soon will they get this? I asked. Sheriff's department serves the papers, usually within 48 hours, she said, handing me my copies that I thanked her, tucking the documents into my folder. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of control. No more lies, no more manipulation. Everything was going through the proper channels now. My next stop was the police station to talk to Jim Morrison. If Harry was in deep with gambling debts, I needed to know everything before he tried something even more desperate. Detective Jim Morrison's office was a small, cluttered room tucked away in the far corner of the Kalispell police station. The space felt like it belonged to another era, with tall, dented filing cabinets lining the walls and stacks of coffee-stained paperwork spilling across his desk. A faint smell of stale coffee and old paper hung in the air. Jim himself had changed since I last saw him a few years back. His hair was grayer, the lines around his eyes deeper, and his shoulders seemed a little more slumped. But when he stood to greet me, his handshake was as firm as ever, a reminder that he was still sharp and capable. Clark, what brings you to my little corner of the world? Jim asked, settling back into his worn leather chair. Information, I said plainly. Bob Harrison suggested you might know something about Harry Thompson's gambling habits. Jim's face shifted from friendly to focused, his detective instincts kicking in. Your son-in-law? What's the situation here? I took a deep breath and laid it out as simply as I could. I explained the ultimatum Harry and my daughter Tiffany had given me, demanding I follow Harry's rules or leave my own house. I told him about my decision to move out, the discovery of Harry's attempt to fraudulently mortgage my property, and the growing suspicion that his behavior was tied to deeper troubles. Jim listened carefully, his pen scratching quick notes on a yellow legal pad. He didn't interrupt, just nodded occasionally, letting me get through the whole story. When I finished, Jim leaned back, his chair creaking. Harry's a known face at Glacier Peaks Casino, he said. He's a regular at the poker tables, been showing up more often lately. Word from the staff is he's playing bigger games, higher stakes than before. Any idea how much he owes? I asked, bracing myself. Jim frowned, flipping through his notes. It's a mix of debts, so it's hard to pin down exactly. Different creditors, different amounts. We've gotten calls about collection issues, not criminal yet, but it's heading that way. I'd estimate he's in the hole for about $18,000 to $20,000, maybe more. The numbers hit me like a punch. Harry had been living in my house, eating my food, acting like he owned the place, all while racking up debts that could have bought a nice car. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. Who's he owe this money to? I asked. Some are legitimate lenders, banks, credit companies, Jim said. But others, let's just say they're not the type to send polite letters. They handle collections their own way, and it's not pretty. How much time does he have before things get worse? Jim shrugged. He's been dodging them. For about 6 weeks. Most creditors give 3 months before they turn up the heat. Harry's running out of time fast. I left the station with a clearer picture of Harry's mess. His gambling explained a lot, his desperation, the fraudulent loan attempt, the way he'd been snapping at me more and more. I wasn't just a convenient bank account to him. I was his last chance to keep the wolves at bay. The thought made my stomach churn. That evening, I sat in my motel room at Pine Lodge, the hum of the air conditioner filling the quiet. The room was basic but clean, with a lumpy bed and a small desk where I spread out my notes. I opened my laptop and updated my evidence file, adding Jim's information to what Bob Harrison had already told me. In my years as a banker, I'd learned to spot patterns, and Harry's were impossible to miss now. He wasn't just ungrateful or bossy. He was desperate, dishonest, and potentially dangerous. The more cornered he felt, the more reckless he'd get. I had to stay one step ahead. The next morning, I started making calls to Harry's creditors. Not to pay his debts. Those were his to deal with. But to make sure they knew he had no legal claim to my house. I wanted to cut off any chance of him using my property as collateral for his schemes. Each conversation was short and to the point, laying out the facts. Harry was a tenant, not an owner, and any documents suggesting otherwise were fraudulent. The truth was my strongest weapon, and I wielded it carefully to BY Friday. I knew it was time to take control of the story in Kalispell. Small towns talk, and gossip spreads faster than wildfire. If I didn't shape the narrative, Harry's version of events would. My first stop was the post office, where Mrs. Henderson from the church mailing committee spotted me near the stamp machine. She was a kind woman, but she collected rumors like some people collect coins, and she was always eager to share. "Clark, dear," she said, her voice sweet but probing. "I've been hearing some troubling things about family troubles. Is everything all right?" I chose my words carefully, knowing they'd be repeated across town by Sunday. "Tiffany and Harry asked me to move out of my house," I said. "So I did. Sometimes adult kids need to handle their own responsibilities." Her eyes widened. "They asked you to leave your house? Didn't you pay for their wedding and help with the down payment?" She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I always wondered how they could afford that place on Harry's salary." I nodded but kept my response vague. "They've had some help over the years. Let the facts speak for themselves." Next, I stopped by Miller's Hardware, where I'd worked part-time after retiring from the bank. The familiar smell of sawdust and paint greeted me as I walked in. Tom Kowalski, the owner, looked up from his inventory sheets, concern creasing his face. "Clark, heard you're staying out at Pine Lodge. What's going on?" Before I could answer, 3 other employees, Dave, Sarah, and young Mike, gathered around, curious. I gave them the short version: Harry and Tiffany's ultimatum, my decision to leave, and the years of financial support I'd provided. Their reactions were instant. Dave, the assistant manager, shook his head. "You paid for their college tuition?" Harry told everyone his family was loaded, and they were helping you with the mortgage. "Harry says a lot of things that aren't true," I said calmly. Tom's face darkened. "That explains why he always had cash, but never took extra shifts. We offered him overtime plenty of times, but he always had other commitments." "Probably at the casino," Sarah muttered from the paint counter, her voice sharp with disapproval that I left the hardware store knowing the truth would spread. Like ripples in a pond. Kalispell's gossip network was more effective than any billboard. My final stop was St. Mark's Lutheran Church, where Pastor Williams was preparing for the weekend services. His office was warm and welcoming, with a worn armchair that had heard countless confessions and concerns. He poured me a cup of coffee and gestured for me to sit. "Clark," he said, his voice gentle but direct, "several folks have mentioned they're worried about you. Can you tell me what's happening?" I appreciated his straightforwardness. He wasn't after gossip. He wanted to help. "Pastor, I've been supporting Tiffany and Harry financially for 5 years," I said. "Last weekend, they told me I could only stay in my own house if I followed Harry's rules. I chose to leave instead." Pastor Williams frowned, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "5 years of support, and they gave you an ultimatum? That's not right, Clark." "I know," I said, "but I'm handling it. I just need to make sure the truth gets out before Harry's lies take root." He nodded, his expression kind but resolute. "You've always been a fair man. If there's anything the church can do, support, a place to stay, let me know." As I left the church, I felt a weight lift. The truth was out there now, moving through Kalispell's streets and conversations. Harry's lies couldn't hold. Up against it. My next steps were clear. Serve the eviction notice, keep building my case, and stay ready for whatever Harry might try next. He was desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. I just had to be patient and let the truth do its work. I decided to walk away instead of accepting their demands. It hurt deeply, like a wound that wouldn't heal. It was eye-opening. I told Pastor Williams honestly, "I love my daughter, but I won't let them treat me like a doormat in my own house." He nodded, his face calm but thoughtful. "Sometimes, loving someone means letting them face the results of their actions. You've been shielding them for too long, Clark. Far too long." On my way back to the motel, I stopped at Annie's coffee shop for a late afternoon coffee. The place buzzed with the usual Friday crowd, retirees chatting over pie, off-duty workers grabbing a quick drink, and mothers pushing strollers. I found a small table in the corner and let the hum of conversations wash over me. "Harry's in debt all over town," one voice said. "Clark's been covering their bills for years," another added. "Strange how they lived so fancy on his paycheck," someone else muttered. The gossip was spreading just as I'd expected. Small towns work like living things. They share news fast, sorting out truth from lies through the wisdom of the crowd. As I left the coffee shop, my phone rang. It was Mrs. Patterson, my neighbor for over 20 years. "Clark, I hope it's okay I'm calling," she said, her voice soft with worry. "There's been a lot of yelling at your house lately. Mostly Harry, but Tiffany's been loud too. Yesterday, the police drove by twice." "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson," I said. "I appreciate you keeping an eye out. Are you okay where you're staying? Do you need anything?" Her concern warmed me, a reminder that this town still had good people. "I'm fine. Thank you. Just taking it day by day." That night, I sat in my motel room, replaying the day's conversations. The town was starting to see the truth without me needing to push. People notice unfairness when it's clear enough. My phone rang again, an unknown number, but the area code was familiar. Probably one of Harry's creditors. I let it go to voicemail and listened later. "This is Marcus Webb from Frontier Financial Services," the message said. "We're looking for Harry Thompson about a past due account. Please call us back soon." They were calling me because Harry likely used my address on his credit applications. Another sign of his lies, another clue he'd planned to dump his debts on me. I deleted the message and opened my laptop to update my file of evidence with today's findings. I should have known they wouldn't give up easily. Harry never was one to back down quietly. Saturday morning started calm. I was sipping coffee, going over bank statements, when my phone began ringing nonstop. First, it was Tom from the hardware store. Then Mrs. Henderson from church. Then Pastor Williams. Each call brought the same upsetting news. Harry was going around town, telling a twisted version of the story. "Clark, you need to hear this," Tom said, his voice tight with anger. "Harry came into my store an hour ago, loud as can be, saying you abandoned them out of nowhere. He's claiming you promised to take care of them forever, then turned your back out of spite." "What exactly did he say?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "He's telling people you're having a mental breakdown. Says you kicked them out because Tiffany wouldn't let you control their lives. And get this, he's saying there's a family medical emergency, and you're refusing to help with the money." I thanked Tom and hung up, my mind racing. Harry was desperate, spinning a story to make himself the victim. It meant his creditors were closing in. The next call proved it. Mr. Miller, this is Detective Morrison from the police station, the voice said. I'm giving you a heads up. Harry Thompson came by this morning, filing a complaint about elder abuse. He's claiming someone at the bank is manipulating you into making bad financial choices. Elder abuse. I repeated, almost laughing at the absurdity. It's nonsense, of course, Detective Morrison said. We told him he'd need medical proof and witnesses, which he can't provide. But he's trying to build a case that you're not in your right mind. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. Tiffany's number. Dad, please pick up, her voicemail pleaded, her voice shaky with tears. I know you're mad, but there's stuff you don't know. I'm pregnant, Dad. All this stress is making me sick. The doctor says if things don't calm down, I could lose the baby. My stomach twisted, that old instinct to protect her kicking in. But something in her voice felt off, too polished, too practiced. Congratulations, sweetheart, I said when I called her back. When did you find out? Last week, she said, her voice breaking. Right before everything went wrong. Dad, I can't lose my baby over money problems. You always said family comes first. Family does come first, I said carefully. That's why I paid $60,000 for your college and $25,000 for your wedding. But what about now? She pressed. What about your grandchild? Her words lingered, heavy with expectation. If she was truly pregnant, if there was really a medical crisis, my choices could hurt someone innocent. But the timing felt too perfect, too convenient. I'd spent years falling for their sob stories, and this one sounded like another act in their play. I ended the call politely but firmly. Back in my motel room, I added Tiffany's claim to my evidence file. The town was watching, and the truth was coming into focus. Harry and Tiffany were fighting hard to keep their lies alive, but small towns have a way of uncovering what's real. I just had to stay steady and let the pieces fall. Tiffany's voice trembled with practiced emotion, the kind that made my heart sink. Dad, have you checked with a doctor about these pregnancy issues? I asked, concerned but cautious. There was a long pause. I've got an appointment next week. She replied softly. Which doctor? I pressed, needing clarity. Dr. Richards at the women's clinic, she said. I knew Dr. Richards well. My wife, Martha, had trusted her for years. I'll call her office to see how I can help with medical costs. I offered, wanting to support my daughter if her situation was real. Tiffany's tone sharpened. Dad, you don't need to call. That's private. Her defensiveness caught me off guard, but I stayed calm. You're right, Tiffany. I won't pry. Just have Dr. Richards contact me about payment options if there's a genuine emergency with my grandchild. The call ended abruptly, leaving me uneasy. Was Tiffany really pregnant, or was this another attempt to manipulate me? I needed to be sure before acting. An hour later, I was walking through downtown when I heard a familiar voice booming outside First National Bank. It was Harry, Tiffany's husband, shouting to a small crowd of onlookers. His words were sharp, laced with that aggressive edge I'd come to dread. He's lost it, Harry yelled, gesturing wildly. A senile old man who kicked his own pregnant daughter out of the house over nothing. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others looking unsure. I approached slowly, keeping my composure. The crowd noticed me before Harry did, their eyes shifting between us. When Harry finally turned and saw me, his face flushed red with anger. There he is, he shouted, pointing. The guy who abandoned his own family. Hello, Harry, I said, my voice steady. How's that gambling debt going? The question hit him hard, like a punch he didn't expect. The crowd stirred, whispers spreading as people pieced things together. Harry's eyes widened. You're crazy, he sputtered. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? I said calmly. $18,000, according to Detective Morrison. Mostly poker tables at Glacier Peaks Casino. I glanced at the crowd, now fully engaged. It's amazing how much money someone can lose when they're living rent-free off someone else. Harry's face turned purple, his fists clenching as he stepped closer, using his height to intimidate. You senile old fool, he growled. You can't just. I can document every dollar I've spent supporting you and Tiffany for 5 years. I cut in, my voice firm but calm. Can you show where your paychecks went? The crowd was silent now, hanging on every word. Harry realized. He was losing them. His story was unraveling, and he knew it. This isn't over, Clark, he barked, shoving through the crowd and storming off. I watched him go, noticing several people pulling out their phones. By evening, the real story would be all over social media. Back at my motel room, I opened my laptop and started typing out the day's events. Harry's public outburst was a desperate move, built on lies that wouldn't hold up. Our small community knew me too well to believe I'd abandoned my family or that I was losing my mind. I'd lived here for decades, helped neighbors, and volunteered at the local food bank. Harry's accusations didn't match the man they knew. Still, Tiffany's pregnancy claim gnawed at me. If she was truly pregnant, this wasn't just about me and Harry, it involved my grandchild. I needed to verify her story before deciding my next step. I picked up my phone and dialed Dr. Richards' office. If there was a real medical emergency, I'd step up, but I wouldn't let myself be played by a fake crisis that Harry's behavior, though, had crossed a dangerous line. His public threats and aggressive posturing weren't just personal, they felt like a warning. I called Detective Morrison, a longtime friend at the police station. "James, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady but serious. "Harry confronted me in front of a crowd today, making threatening gestures. He's getting out of control, and I'm worried about what he might do next." Morrison listened carefully. "Come to the station tomorrow morning," he said. "Bring any evidence you have, texts, emails, anything that shows this pattern." I agreed, but the day wasn't over yet. An hour later, there was a knock at my motel room door. It was Steve Brennan, the night manager at Pine Lodge Motel, a retired Army sergeant with a no-nonsense attitude. "Mr. Miller," he said, his voice low. "That guy who was yelling in the parking lot earlier? He came back about 20 minutes ago. Stood outside your door for a good 5 minutes, muttering something about teaching old fools a lesson. Made some guests nervous." My stomach tightened. "Did you catch it on camera?" I asked. Steve nodded. "Got it on the security footage. I can give it to the police if you need it." "Thank you, Steve," I said. That footage could be important. Steve's military instincts had kicked in. He knew trouble when he saw it. And Harry was becoming a real problem. The next morning, I walked into the police station with a USB drive containing Steve's security footage and a detailed timeline of Harry's behavior over the past few weeks. I included every incident, the heated arguments, the subtle threats, and now this public confrontation and creepy visit to my motel. Detective Morrison reviewed everything with his usual thoroughness, his face grim as he watched the video of Harry lurking outside my door. "This is serious, Clark," Morrison said, leaning back in his chair. "We'll file a formal complaint and look into protection options. If Harry's escalating like this, we need to act fast." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and resolve. Harry's lies and threats were unraveling, but I wasn't out of the woods yet. Tiffany's pregnancy claims still hung over me, and I needed answers. For now, though, I had the community's support, solid evidence, and a clear plan to protect myself. Harry had picked a fight he couldn't win, not when the truth was on my side. Clark sat across from Detective Jim Morrison in the small, fluorescent-lit office of the Pine Lodge police station. The air smelled faintly of coffee and old paperwork. "Clark, this shows a clear pattern of intimidation," Jim said, his voice steady but serious. "Combined with what you saw at the bank yesterday, we've got enough for a restraining order." Clark leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly. "What would that involve?" Jim adjusted his glasses. "It's a legal order that stops Harry from coming within 500 feet of you, your home, or any of your property. If he violates it, he'll be arrested on the spot." Jim paused, then leaned back in his chair, his expression darkening. "There's something else you need to know. Last Friday, Harry met with a lawyer about adverse possession laws." The words hit Clark like a bucket of ice water. "Squatters' rights?" he asked, his voice low. "Exactly," Jim replied. "Harry was looking into whether he could claim legal ownership of your house by living there long enough. Montana law requires 5 years of hostile occupation, living there without your permission. He and Tiffany have been there for 3 years. He was likely planning to wait 2 more, then file a claim to take your home." Clark's mind reeled. Harry, his son-in-law, hadn't just been freeloading off Clark's generosity. He'd been scheming for years to steal the family home through a legal loophole. "Does he have any chance of winning that claim?" Clark asked, his voice tight with worry. Jim shook his head firmly. "Not a chance. Adverse possession only works if the person lives there without the owner's permission. You let Harry and Tiffany stay in your house, and they never paid rent or property taxes. There's no legal ground for his claim. But, Jim added, pulling a file folder from his desk, it shows he's been plotting this for a while. That's premeditation, Clark. He wasn't just living there. He was trying to take it. Clark's stomach churned. The memory of Harry's smug grin during the beer incident flashed in his mind. It hadn't been about showing dominance, as Clark first thought. It was about keeping up a lie, a long-term plan to deceive Clark and steal his home. What about the restraining order? Clark asked. Can we get it soon? I'll fast-track it, Jim said, jotting a note. With the evidence we have, your statement, the bank incident, and this lawyer meeting, I can have it. Ready by this afternoon. Clark left the police station with a heavy heart but a clear mind. Harry's true character was now undeniable. The man who'd married his daughter wasn't just a freeloader. He was a calculating opportunist. As Clark walked to his car, the crisp Montana air did little to cool the anger simmering inside him. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. It was time to take action. His first call was to Marcus Webb at Frontier Financial Services, one of Harry's creditors who'd been leaving voicemails at Clark's number for weeks. Mr. Webb, this is Clark Miller, returning your call about Harry Thompson, Clark said, keeping his tone calm and professional. I need to clear something up. Harry doesn't live at my address anymore and has no legal claim to my property. He listed my home as his residence on his credit applications, but he was only a guest. I evicted him last week. If you're looking for him, he works at Mountain View Auto Dealership on Highway 93. The second call was to Continental Credit Recovery. This is Clark Miller, he began. You've been calling about Harry Thompson's debts. I want to make it clear that Harry has no ownership in my property and isn't living here anymore. Clark kept each call short and factual, careful not to share personal details or take responsibility for Harry's debts. He was simply correcting the false address Harry had used to dodge his creditors at BY noon. Clark had contacted 6 collection agencies, each one surprised to learn Harry had been lying about his residence. Harry's carefully built house of cards was starting to wobble, and Clark felt a grim satisfaction knowing the truth was catching up. That afternoon, Judge Ellen Morrison signed the restraining order in her quiet chambers at the county courthouse. The document was clear. Harry Thompson was legally barred from coming within 500 feet of Clark, his home, or his property. Any violation would lead to immediate arrest and possible jail time. Clark thanked the judge and left with the paperwork in hand, a weight lifting from his shoulders. Harry had spent 3 years plotting to steal his home, but now he couldn't even step foot near it without facing consequences. As Clark drove back to Pine Lodge, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This isn't over, old man. Clark's jaw tightened. He forwarded the message to Detective Morrison, then blocked the number. Keeping evidence was second nature now. He wasn't taking any chances that by Monday morning, Clark was at the courthouse again, filing the restraining order officially. The clerk, a young woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, stamped the final copy with a satisfying thud. Mr. Miller, this order is effective immediately, she said. Any contact from Harry, or if he comes within 500 feet, it's a violation. Call the police right away. Thank you, Clark said, tucking the papers into his jacket. He knew the sheriff's deputy would serve Harry the order within hours. As he stepped outside, his phone rang. It was Mike Brennan, Harry's boss at Mountain View Auto Dealership. Mike was a good man, someone Clark had known for 2 decades, ever since Clark co-signed a car loan for Mike's son. Clark, I need to ask you something straight, Mike said, his voice heavy with concern. Harry's been telling people you had a breakdown, maybe dementia, and that's why you kicked him out. He's also saying there's a family medical emergency and you're refusing to help. Is any of that true? Clark gripped the phone tighter. Mike, Harry gave me an ultimatum. Obey his rules or leave my own house. I chose to leave. There's no medical emergency, and my mind is as sharp as ever. You can check with my banker, my lawyer, or Detective Morrison if you need proof. There was a long pause. I was afraid of that, Mike said finally. Clark, I've had 3 customers today mention Harry owing them money. One saw him at the casino last week. This is starting to hurt my business. I understand, Clark said. I'm sorry it's come to this. I'm going to have to let him go, Mike said. I can't have this kind of drama around customers who trust us with big purchases. 20 minutes later, Clark sat at Annie's diner, sipping coffee and watching the street through the window. A white van pulled up to his former house, A magnetic sign on the door reading Continental Credit Recovery. Clark recognized it from his call with them on Friday. The truth was closing in on Harry from all sides. His phone rang again. It was Tiffany, his daughter. "Dad, there are men at the house asking about Harry's debts," she said, her voice shaking with panic. "They're asking about our assets, our income, everything. What's going on?" Clark took a deep breath, keeping his voice steady. "Tiffany, Harry's been lying to a lot of people, including his creditors. He told them he owned the house, but he doesn't. I had to set the record straight. You need to talk to him about his debts." Tiffany went silent for a moment. "I didn't know it was this bad," she whispered. "He said everything was under control." "I'm sorry, sweetheart," Clark said gently. "But Harry's been playing a dangerous game, and it's catching up to him." As Clark hung up, he felt a mix of relief and sorrow. Harry's schemes were unraveling, but it was painful to see Tiffany caught in the fallout. Still, Clark knew he'd done the right thing. The restraining order was in place, the creditors were circling, and Harry's job was on the line. For the first time in years, Clark felt like he was back in control of his home and his life. He took another sip of coffee, watching the quiet street, ready for whatever came next. "What did you tell them, Dad?" Tiffany's voice trembled on the phone, full of worry. "I told them the truth, sweetheart. Harry doesn't own my house, and he doesn't live there anymore." I kept my tone steady, trying to stay calm for her sake. "But they're talking about taking his wages, seizing his things." Her voice rose, confused and scared. "Dad, I don't understand any of this." I sighed, feeling the weight of the situation. "That's what happens when someone borrows money they can't pay back. Those are the consequences Harry brought on himself. Not me. He owes $18,000, she whispered, shocked. How could that even happen? It was clear Tiffany hadn't known the full story. I hated breaking it to her. "Gambling debts," I said gently. "Detective Morrison says it's from Glacier Peaks Casino." There was a long silence on the line. Then, quietly, she said, "He told me he was working late those nights." "I'm so sorry you're finding out like this, Tiffany." My heart ached for her. The sheriff's deputy was there too, wasn't he? Served Harry some legal papers. "Yeah," she said, her voice shaking. "He's been yelling and throwing things ever since." "Those papers were probably the restraining order," I explained. "Harry's starting to realize he's out of options." "Dad, he's talking about leaving town," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "He says there's nothing left for him here." What am I supposed to do? I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "Make your choices based on who Harry really is, not who you wanted him to be." That evening, I parked across the street from the house I used to own. From my car, I watched the chaos unfold. 3 different creditor vehicles had pulled up during the day, each one demanding money Harry didn't have. Mrs. Patterson, the kind neighbor who'd lived next door for years, gave me a sad wave. She'd been watching this mess grow, her face full of concern. Through the living room window, I could see Harry and Tiffany arguing. His movements were wild, angry, desperate. Tiffany's were small, like she was trying to protect herself, scared and unsure. The perfect marriage they'd built, partly with my money, was falling apart as reality crashed. My phone buzzed with a text from Steve, the manager at Pine Lodge, where I was staying. That guy tried to get in the building. Again, told him about the restraining order. He left, but he was furious. I forwarded the message to Detective Morrison. Harry was already breaking the restraining order, just hours after being served. His desperation was making him careless, which made him dangerous, but also predictable. A man with gambling debts, no job, and legal troubles didn't have many choices left. He could face his problems like an adult or run away. Knowing Harry, running seemed more likely. Driving back to Pine Lodge, I thought about what might happen next. If Harry left town to escape his debts, what would Tiffany do? Would she follow him, staying loyal to a man who'd lied to her for years? Or would she finally see him for who he was and choose a different path? Either way, the consequences were theirs to face. For 5 years, I'd shielded them from reality, paying for their college, their wedding, even their house. But that ended the day they demanded I choose between my self-respect and their needs. I chose self-respect. Now, they had to make their own choices. After 2 days of watching their lives unravel, I decided it was time to talk. I called Tiffany Wednesday morning. "Meet me at the diner," I said. "Just you. I can't leave Harry alone right now, Dad." She replied, "He's really struggling." "Then we have nothing to talk about." I said firmly. The restraining order means I can't be near him anyway. There was a long pause. Okay, she said finally. Where and when? Main Street Diner, 2 o'clock p.m., back corner booth. Somewhere private. I got to the diner early and picked a booth facing away from the street. I wanted this conversation to be about our words, not distractions from passing cars. When Tiffany walked in, she looked worn out, older than her 28 years. Stress had carved lines around her eyes, and she fidgeted nervously with her purse strap as she slid into the seat across from me. Dad, I know you're mad, she started, her words spilling out fast. Harry lost his job, and these debt collectors won't stop. The phone rings all day. People keep showing up at the house, demanding money we don't have. I don't know what to do. I waited until she was done, then spoke calmly. I'm giving you one chance to handle this with some dignity, Tiffany. What do you mean? She asked, her voice small. I want the truth to come out, I said. A public statement about how much I've supported you both and why I walked away. Her face turned red. You want me to embarrass myself in front of everyone? I want you to be honest, I corrected. There's a difference. What kind of statement? She asked, her voice wary that I'd spent 2 days thinking about what fairness looked like. 3 things, I said. First, you make an announcement at church during Sunday testimony time. Second, you write a letter to the editor of the Tribune. Third, you post on Facebook, visible to all our mutual friends and family. In each one, you explain everything. How I paid for your college, your wedding, the mortgage on the house, and how you and Harry gave me an ultimatum that forced me to leave. Tiffany stared at me, her eyes wide with shock. You're serious? I am, I said. The truth is the only way to start rebuilding. You decide if you're ready for that. She didn't answer right away. Her hands twisted the purse strap tighter, and her eyes darted to the table. I could see the weight of it all pressing down on her. The debts, the lies, the crumbling life she'd thought was solid. I didn't envy her position, but I wasn't going to shield her from it anymore. The time for that was over. I need to think about it, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Take your time, I said, but not too much. The longer you wait, the harder this gets. As she left the diner, I watched her walk to her car, her shoulders slumped. I didn't know what she'd choose, Harry, the truth, or something else entirely. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. I'd given her a path to dignity. Now it was up to her to take it. Steam curling up into the air. Her eyes avoided mine, darting to the window where the small Montana town bustled softly in the morning light. Dad, she said, her voice low. People will think you had a father who loved you so much he gave up everything. His savings, his retirement, for your happiness. And they'll think you took it all for granted until it was gone. I leaned back in the booth, the worn leather creaking under me. Her words stung, but they weren't new. For years, I'd watched her drift away, caught up in her life with Harry, a man who'd brought nothing but trouble. What about Harry? I asked, keeping my tone steady. Tiffany's jaw tightened. Harry's not part of my life anymore. The restraining order is permanent. He's gone, Dad. I nodded, but my heart stayed heavy. If you choose to stay married to him, that's your call. But it means choosing him over me, over any chance of us being family again. Her eyes widened, and she gripped the edge of the table. You're asking me to choose between my husband and my father? No, I said, my voice firm but calm. I'm asking you to choose between a man who threatened me and the man who raised you. The fact that you see those as equal choices shows how far apart we've grown. Tiffany went quiet, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee mug. The silence stretched, heavy with years of unspoken hurt. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. What about the house? It's been in our family for generations. Grandma grew up there. You grew up there. I grew up there. I took a deep breath, knowing this would hit her hard. The house is going to the Montana Veterans Housing Initiative. 3 families of veterans will live there, people who know what sacrifice really means. The will's already changed, Tiffany. It's signed, witnessed, and filed with my lawyer. Even if you do everything I ask, the house won't be yours. That's final. Her face paled, and she leaned back like I'd slapped her. Why, Dad? Why would you do that? Because I need to know any effort to fix things between us comes from love, not because you're chasing an inheritance. For 5 years, you and Harry treated me like a bank account, not a father. I want to see if there's anything real left between us, something that's not about money. Tears welled in Tiffany's eyes, and for the first time in years, they looked genuine, not like the crocodile tears she'd used to get her way. "I'm sorry, Dad," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean for things to get this bad. I didn't realize how much I hurt you." I looked at her, my heart aching. "Sorry's a start, sweetheart, but it's not enough anymore. The whole town saw how you and Harry treated me, like I was just there to pay the bills, to clean up your messes. They saw you put his demands over my dignity. Words are easy. I need to see actions now." She wiped her eyes with a napkin, her hands shaking. "What if I can't do it? What if I can't stand up in front of everyone and admit how wrong I was?" "Then you live with that choice," I said gently. "Harry's probably leaving town soon. His debts are piling up, and men like him always run when things get tough. You can go with him, start over somewhere else. Or you can stay here, face the truth, and rebuild your life with honesty. If you choose the second path, maybe, just maybe, we can start building something real again, not based on guilt or money, but on respect." Tiffany's voice trembled. "How long do I have to decide?" "Sunday morning," I said. "Church starts at 10. If you're not there to tell the truth in front of everyone, I'll know you've made your choice." She stood slowly, looking older than her 30 years, her shoulders hunched like the weight of the world was on them. "Dad," she said, hesitating at the edge of the table, "do you think you could ever forgive me?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. For a moment, I saw the little girl who used to run through the backyard, giggling as she wove dandelion crowns and begged for one more bedtime story about brave princesses saving the day. "Forgiveness and trust aren't the same, Tiffany," I said softly. "I forgave you the day I chose to walk away instead of fight. But trust? That's something you'll have to earn back, one honest step at a time." She nodded, her eyes glistening, and walked toward the door. I stayed in the booth, watching her car pull out of the parking lot, her taillights fading into the morning haze. Sunday was 4 days away. By then, I'd know if my daughter had the strength to choose truth over comfort, to choose family over loyalty to a man who'd never deserved it. The days passed slowly, each one heavy with waiting. I went about my routine, tending to the garden, fixing the fence, helping at the Veterans Center, but my thoughts were on Tiffany. Would she show up? Would she find the courage to face the town and admit her mistakes? Sunday morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of Montana day where the sky feels endless. I walked into St. Mark's Church, my boots echoing on the wooden floor. The sanctuary was fuller than usual, the pews packed with familiar faces, neighbors, friends, people who'd known our family for decades. Word had spread about some kind of announcement, and the air buzzed with curiosity that I took my usual spot, 3 rows from the front, and folded my hands in my lap. Pastor Williams led the congregation. Through hymns and prayers, his voice steady and warm. But I could feel the energy in the room, the way people glanced my way, wondering what was coming. When it was time for testimonies, a hush fell over the sanctuary. I held my breath, my eyes fixed on the back row. Then, Tiffany stood. She looked small in her simple blue dress, her hair pulled back, her face pale but determined. She walked down the center aisle, her steps slow but steady, each one echoing in the quiet church. The congregation watched, some with sympathy, others with judgment. She reached the front and turned to face everyone. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the podium, but her voice, when she spoke, was clear. "I've made mistakes," she began, and I knew, in that moment, that whatever came next, my daughter had taken the first step toward rebuilding what we'd lost. Tiffany stood at the podium, her hands gripping the edges tightly. The small church was packed with familiar faces, neighbors, friends, and family she'd known her whole life in this quiet Montana town. The sanctuary was silent, every eye fixed on her. She took a deep breath, her voice steady but heavy with emotion. "I need to share something important about my father, Clark Miller," she began, her words echoing through the hushed room. "For the last 5 years, my dad has been our rock. He's supported my husband, Harry, and me in ways I can't even begin to describe. He paid $160,000 for my college education at a private university when I could have gone to a state school for much less. He covered $25,000 for our wedding when Harry's family couldn't help with their share. A soft murmur rippled through the crowd. These weren't vague claims. They were specific, undeniable sacrifices. Tiffany's voice grew stronger as she continued. Dad gave us his family home, the house his parents left him, where he and my mom built their life together. For 20 years. When Harry and I couldn't pay the mortgage, Dad stepped in. When we needed groceries, utilities, or car insurance, he paid for it all, even though he was living on his Social Security checks. The congregation was silent now, hanging on her. Every word. Tiffany's eyes glistened with tears, but she pressed on. 3 weeks ago, my husband gave my father an ultimatum. Harry told him to obey his orders like a servant or leave the house, Dad's own house. And Dad chose to leave. He walked away rather than give up his dignity. The room was so quiet you could hear the creak of the wooden pews. Even the children seemed to sense the weight of the moment. Tiffany's voice broke slightly as she continued. I stood by and let my husband disrespect the man who gave up his retirement savings to keep us comfortable. I chose loyalty to Harry over the man who raised me with love, patience, and endless generosity. I was wrong. We were wrong. Tears streamed down her face now, but her voice remained clear. I'm standing here today because my father gave me one last chance to choose. Truth over pride. I owe him so much more than an apology, but I hope this is a start. Dad, I'm so sorry for what we put you through. The congregation stirred, their murmurs now filled with support and admiration. Tiffany stepped down from the podium and returned to her seat, her head bowed. Pastor Williams, a kind man with graying hair, approached the podium, his own eyes misty. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is admit our mistakes in front of others, he said. Tiffany has shown that courage today, and her father, Clark, has shown us what it means to hold on to dignity in the face of hardship. After the service, people crowded around Clark outside the church. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the local bakery, squeezed his hand tightly. We all knew you were helping them, Clark, she said softly. But we didn't know how they treated you in return. You didn't deserve that. Tom, the owner of the hardware store, clapped Clark on the shoulder. That took real strength. Setting boundaries like that. Family makes it tough, but you did the right thing. The most powerful moment came when Tiffany approached her father alone, away from the crowd. She looked nervous, her hands fidgeting. Dad, I wrote a letter. To the Tribune. It'll run this Wednesday. And I'm posting on Facebook tonight, telling everyone the truth about what happened. I want people to know how much you did for us and how we failed you. Clark nodded, his expression calm but guarded. Tiffany hesitated, then added, Harry's gone. He packed his truck yesterday while I was at work and left. No note, no address, nothing. Clark sighed. He wasn't surprised. Men like Harry always ran when their actions caught up with them. I'm sorry your marriage ended this way, he said gently. Tiffany shook her head. I'm not. I filed for divorce this morning. I found out he'd been using my credit cards to gamble, racking up debts I didn't even know about. It's worse than I thought. 3 months later, Clark stood in the front yard of his old family home, watching as 3 veteran families moved into the new transitional housing units created by the Montana Veterans Housing Initiative. The house had been renovated into 3 separate apartments, each with its own bedroom and bathroom, but sharing a common kitchen and living space. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, a single mother who'd recently returned from deployment, was helping her 2 young children unpack. She spotted Clark and walked over, a grateful smile on her face. Mr. Miller, this place means the world to us, she said. A safe home for my kids while I get back on my feet. It's more than I could have hoped for. Thank you for giving this house to veterans. Clark smiled faintly. Veterans understand sacrifice, he said. This house belongs with people who've earned it. His own life had found a new rhythm. Clark had bought a small lakeside cabin on Flathead Lake with the money he'd saved by no longer supporting Tiffany and Harry. The cabin was modest, 2 bedrooms, a cozy kitchen where he could cook his own meals, and a dock where he launched his fishing boat. Mornings were spent sipping coffee on the deck, watching the sun rise over the water. Afternoons were for fishing or reading, and evenings were quiet, filled with the simple joys he hadn't had time for in years. After so long, carrying the weight of others' demands, this felt like freedom. His phone buzzed with a text from Tiffany. Dad, I'm 3 months into counseling now. I'm learning a lot about what makes a healthy relationship. Could we have coffee sometime? I want to earn your trust back, one step at a time. Clark looked out at the lake, where an osprey was, circling above the shallows, hunting for fish. Tiffany had kept her promises. The letter in the Tribune had been honest and detailed, laying out everything she and Harry had done. The Facebook post had sparked an outpouring of support from the community, with dozens of comments praising Clark's generosity and Tiffany's courage in owning her mistakes. More than that, she wasn't just asking for forgiveness, she was working for it, taking responsibility for her actions. He typed back, "Coffee sounds good. How about Saturday at the diner?" Her reply came quickly, "I'll be there. And Dad, thank you for not giving up on me." Clark set his phone down and watched the osprey dive, emerging from the water with a fish in its talons. The sun was setting over the Rockies, casting a warm golden glow across the lake. In the distance, he could hear the laughter of children at the veterans' housing complex, families starting fresh in the home where he'd learned the hard difference between generosity and enabling. Tiffany was trying, really trying, to rebuild what had been broken. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight, but it was a start. Clark took a sip of his coffee, feeling the cool evening breeze. Patience and dignity had carried him through the storm. Now, with the lake shimmering in the twilight, and a new chapter beginning, he felt something he hadn't in years. Peace. That if you enjoyed this story, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. To hear the next story, click the box on the right. Thanks for watching.